Hi, I'm so glad you're here. I want to tell you a little about what this space is, and maybe even more importantly, what it isn't. Bubble Witch was never created to be another hustle disguised as magic. This isn't a place for perfect rituals, productivity challenges, or pressure wrapped in moss and tied together with twine. This is a place for tiny moments of joy, for seasonal noticing, for gentle living, for crafting, bubbles, tea, nature, soft things, and the quiet little moments that help us remember we are still human underneath all the noise. Around here, we celebrate the seasons a little differently. Not in one giant, stressful burst of activity. Not by trying to make one perfect day carry the emotional weight of an entire season. Instead, we move through what I call the gathering season. For me, each Sabbath becomes part of a 6-week seasonal arc. The 5 weeks leading up to the Sabbath are for slowly noticing the season arriving. Noticing the changes in the air, the flowers blooming, the foods appearing, the way the evening light shifts, the sounds outside after dark. The tiny pieces of life quietly telling us where we are in the wheel of the year. It's not about doing everything. It's not about buying everything. And it's definitely not about performing spirituality correctly while Mercury cartwheels through your emotional support spaghetti. It's about allowing the season enough space to actually be felt. Maybe gathering looks like making tea and sitting outside for 10 quiet minutes. Maybe it's blowing bubbles at sunset. Maybe it's stitching tiny mushrooms onto fabric while listening to rain hit the windows. Maybe it's baking something that smells like memory. Maybe it's simply noticing that the sunlight lingers a little longer now than it did a few weeks ago. Tiny things, gentle things, human things. And then eventually, the Sabbath arrives, not as a stressful finish line, but as a natural moment of celebration inside the season you've already been slowly living in. And after that comes the space in between. Honestly, the space in between may be my favorite part. It's a week for rest, for reflection, for soft landings, for letting the nervous system unclench a little before the next gathering season begins. Modern life asks us to move from one thing to the next without ever fully arriving anywhere. Celebrate, recover quickly, move on, produce more, keep going. But nature doesn't move that way. Seasons don't move that way. And humans were never meant to move that way either. So this space is my gentle rebellion against that kind of living. Here, we celebrate slowly. We notice things. We make things imperfectly. We rest without earning it first. We look for tiny moments of joy because sometimes those tiny moments are what carry us through the harder seasons of life. You don't need to be an expert to be here. You don't need expensive tools. You don't need perfect aesthetics. You don't need to know anything about Sabbats or folklore or seasonal living. You just need a willingness to notice the world around you a little more gently. That's enough. That has always been enough. Before we go, I want to introduce you to something that will probably become a little tradition around here. These are the Tiny Season Tin cards, specifically the Litha edition. They aren't oracle cards. They don't predict anything. They aren't here to tell you your future or whether the universe thinks you should reorganize your entire life at 2 a.m. after drinking too much caffeine. These are tiny seasonal action cards. Little invitations to experience the season you're already living in. The cards are divided into 4 gentle categories: connect, tend, rest, and notice. Some invite us to connect with memory, nature, joy, or the people around us. Some remind us to tend to our spaces, our bodies, or comforting little routines. Some remind us that rest is part of seasonal living too. And some simply ask us to notice tiny, beautiful things that are already happening around us every day. Tiny things. But honestly, life is mostly tiny things. And I think we lose a lot of ourselves when we stop noticing them. So at the end of each episode, we'll pull one tiny season tin card together and carry that little invitation into the week ahead. Ah, this week's card is a connect card. Gather a tiny summer treasure. And I love this one because it reminds us that not all treasures are expensive or rare. Sometimes a summer treasure is a smooth rock found on a walk, a feather, a pressed flower, a shell, a leaf that caught your attention for no reason at all. Tiny things that quietly say, I was here, and so were you. So sometime this week, maybe gather one tiny summer treasure. Not because it needs to become productive, not because it has to become art, not because you need to post it online, just because noticing beautiful little things is part of being alive. Until next time, enjoy the tiny little moments of joy that every day has to offer. And I'll meet you again somewhere between the bubbles and the tea.